Welcome back everyone, the professor here. In this video we're going to be looking at approved fabricators and special inspections in the building code. This is our fourth video on a regulatory topic. We will be looking at how a shop can become an approved fabricator, what special inspections are, and when they are required. It is a case of out of sight, out of mind. Many believe that just because the component was made in a shop and brought to the site that it's mysteriously of higher quality and more trustworthy. That is not always the case. Many do believe that those elements have strict or product liability level applied to them when it comes to failure. But that still doesn't mean there's not regulation or oversight. The FAA has engineering that overlooks the design of planes and approval of planes while they're still being designed. FDA looks at how drugs are being manufactured. EPA has their own requirements. And the building industry is absolutely no different. This is a topic that jurisdictions even get wrong frequently. It's because the jurisdictions are the entity that has taken over the lead on enforcing special inspections and such, if not only in a partial manner. To begin, I want to make two definitions very, very clear. AHJ, in Chapter 1 of the IBC, the user notes, it says that the code official appointed by the authority having jurisdiction. That means AHJ, the authority having jurisdiction, is not a person. Building official, Chapter 2 of the IBC, it states that the officer or other designated authority charged with the administration and enforcement of this code or duly authorized representative. Both of these have been applied wrong. The building official is an individual. The AHJ is an entity. It's not a person. But before we get into this topic, I want to do a quick review on regulation in the construction industry. If you have not seen our exiting video, take a look at that. We'll get into it much more now, but we'll just do a quick review, give you something to brush up on as we move into this topic. All right, let's get down to regulation of construction. The first known building code was issued by Babylonian King Hammurabi about 5,500 years ago. After two major fires on October 8, 1871, the NFPA was formed. NFPA produces standards, codes, and other supplements for construction, including the NFPA 101, which is known as the Life Safety Code. Regulation of construction in today's world, there are two types of codes. There are, number one, construction codes. These are codes that regulate how things are constructed. And then, of course, maintenance codes. Those are the codes that are more oriented to how we maintain once we get the certificate of occupancy and we start using the building. So I want to get into a little bit more of the legacy codes before we proceed, as they lay the foundation for special inspections and for approved fabricators. This is information that we didn't cover in the exiting, so pay attention right now. This is new information. But the legacy codes were the codes that existed after the original exiting code of the NFPA back in 1927 to the more modern times, which extended all the way to the earliest part of my career. There were three main model code agencies across this country. They had their own three separate codes. They were pretty much similar in many respects, though, and they came together somewhere around 1994-95 to form what is now ICC, the International Code Council. And of course, the International Code Council published their very first IBC, International Building Code, in 2000. So as we know, the legacy code first started with the largest one I think that I'm aware of was ICBO, which was based out of Whittier. They had the Uniform Building Code. It set up in 1927 its inspections for structural components as a requirement for the first time. And then, of course, the term special inspections came out of the UBC in the 1961 edition. Then the second code that I want to talk about is the Building Officials and Code Administrators, or the BOCA code, was also referred to as the Basic Building Code. The Basic Building Code, of course, first introduced special inspections in 1988 and limited those special inspections to structural components only. And then in 1996 edition, they began requiring special inspections on non-structural components. And then, of course, the last one is the standard or the Southern Building Code, published by the Southern Building Code Congress. Of course, most everyone referred to it as the Southern, but I remember it being called the Standard as well. It was first published in 1945, so it was kind of the latecomer of those three legacy code groups that did model codes. All three code development groups were affected by some major events. First was the 1973 Skyline Plaza collapse in Fairfax, Virginia, killing 14, injuring 35. And then in 1979, the Rosemont Horizon Arena collapse in Chicago, Illinois, killing 5, injuring 12. And by the way, you can look at these up. And of course, the one that I'm most familiar with, because it occurred very early in my career, the 1981 Hyatt Regency collapse of Kansas City, Missouri, killing 114, injuring 216. That, to this day, is by far the most deadly design defect event that we've seen in our industry, in our country's history. I want to remind you that that regulation of the construction is found in the IBC, as we mentioned, the International Building Code, as well as other codes. Be sure to look at the Exene video to look at it. Building codes focus on protection during a single event, not multiple events simultaneously. In other words, a fire in a single location of a building, a collapse at a single spot. They don't look at multiple ones because it's just too hard to control those variables. It would make construction almost virtually impossible to afford economically. The IBC is also known as a performance code, unlike the legacy codes, which were strictly prescriptive. But as I said before, this isn't a performance code like we see in Europe. It does have in Chapter 1 some latitude to give the building official some ability to work with designers to base more on performance, but it still does have its prescriptive sections, and that's what why we're still a little bit in the dark ages compared to Europe, with their building codes being so progressive with the performance base and laying that responsibility on the designers. So regulation in the U.S. Today, the regulations for construction is found in the IBC. Today, as always, we're going to be looking at the 2018, just because the 2021 hasn't seen widespread adoption. More than likely, probably won't either, just because of the way the cycles work. It probably won't be until the next release in 3 years that we'll see jurisdictions accepting the newer edition. Today, when we look at special inspections and approved fabricators, it's all going to be coming out of Chapter 17 of the IBC. Of course, definitions will be found in Chapter 2, may be found in other places, but most of it coming in Chapter 2. And of course, we will always be citing IBC sections, so you have a reference you can go back and look to. As with the Exene video, and probably will be with any time we look at a code, you're going to notice that we have in these slides orange numbers and sections called out. Those are typically going to be definitions found in Chapter 2. Will be found in some other areas, but largely Chapter 2. We have green denoting what the actual code sections are, and of course I use blue to refer back to other terms that are defined in Chapter 2, as well as probably highlight something that we're looking at that specific moment in time. So let's go back to our slides, and we'll get start exploring the inspections required, and then we'll move into the special inspections. So IBC section 110 actually names off all the inspections that need to be. 110.2 talks about the preliminary inspection. That's usually typically a kickoff. Of course, then we have our required inspections that are found in 110.3, and those sub paragraphs of that. We start, of course, with footings, then we get into concrete slab and under the floor, our lowest floor elevation, framing. Anyone who's built has seen all these before anyway. Lath and gypsum board being next. Weather exposed balcony and walking surfaces. Of course, fire and smoke resistant penetrations. This is key because usually these are in rated constructions that are very, very important for evacuation of human life in a building during a fire event. Of course, then we've got the energy efficiency, and of course they have some miscellaneous things listed in 110.3.9. Again, now we move to the 110.3.10, which is the special inspection. And of course, it references back to Chapter 17. We're going to spend a lot of this video looking at Chapter 17. And then, of course, our final inspection. After you get your final inspection, usually you will end up getting your certificate of occupancy, your C of O, and the owner will now have use of that space for whatever their needs were when we designed it. So now we'll look on the special inspections definition. This is the key to everything that we're going to be talking about, because special inspections are the key to the approved fabricator as well as to the field work. Here we have the definition of a of what a special inspection is, and it's inspection of construction requiring the expertise of an approved special inspector. This is usually someone that's registered or has special training to look at that particular element they're doing in order to ensure compliance with this code and the approved construction documents. Again, it's looking at both not just the code, but what was designed to make sure that the design intent's being met as well. There are two types of special inspections. There's this is the continuous special inspection, which means the special inspector is there at all times during the work being done, or as we can see here, they have what they call the periodic special inspection, which means special inspector is only there intermittently during the work being done, and that all depends on what is being inspected, what's being constructed, what's being built, whether it's in shop or not. Special inspector is defined as a person who is qualified by an approved agency, and that's defined also in the code and approved by the building official. Sometimes these are people who are highly trained in welding inspectors in particular. IBC 1704.2.1 mentions the qualifications. It must be documented what the special inspector's competence is related to this. There is one caveat. The registrant of record and their staff for the project may also act as an approved agency. So in other words, just as the design engineer, the design architect, if you want, you can be the special inspector as well. That certainly carries on liabilities. So if a designer is doing that, make sure that you do have expertise in it, because otherwise you're going to be putting yourself into a high level of liability for really not worth the risk, in my opinion. Special inspection, the approved agency here, we see what the code mentions, how it is very much approved by the building official. We do have third-party companies out there, and you can look them up on the internet or whatever, but those are approved by most of these agencies, and of course each jurisdiction will have to have their own list, or they may have a couple of them. Several of the jurisdictions may go together and say, hey, we're going to put this list together and we're going to accept it no matter what. Or one jurisdiction, a smaller jurisdiction, may say, we'll accept the list of the larger jurisdiction who's not far away. So it's not necessarily an arduous thing, but it is something that every jurisdiction must have. They must make sure that they have those approvals in place, just because the code requires it, and it makes it easier for us as designers to comply. Key attributes or expectations of approval of an approved agency is, number one, they've got to be independent. It's about them being independent from the contractor and the work being done. They have to have the equipment. If you're doing testing, you got to have the equipment. If you don't have the equipment, you're not qualified to do it. So that's a big thing with it. And then, of course, the personnel. Each person has to be, who's being responsible for it, has got to be trained, has to understand what they really are looking at, and capable of knowing, is this being done appropriately. Special inspections have materials that we have to call out. If you look now, and again, you'll see all these sections being called out in the IBC. Structural steel has to be special inspected. Concrete over 3,000 PSI, design PSI, has to be inspected. Masonry has to be inspected. High load wood diaphragms, those will have to be special inspected. Metal plate truss connectors, these are the gang nails that we see in wood trusses. Soils, of course, is always a special inspection. Continuing, we have the deep foundation systems. Again, these covers 3 different areas of 1705, 0.7, 0.8, and 0.9. Shop fabricated systems. Inspections by fabricator as stated in 14.2.5. We need to understand that if they're not an approved fabricator, they must do internal special inspections that are no different than what we do on the field. That's where I see a lot of gaps in the application of this, and since the jurisdictions take the lead on enforcing this, that's really kind of more a gaffe on their end for not following through with that appropriately. Wind resistant systems, anything that's resisting wind or seismic, those will always be special inspected just to make sure they're being constructed appropriately. Sprayed on fire resistant material, of course we need to know, that's almost automatic because you've got to make sure it's done right. Again, this is a different type of fire coating system. It's a very specialized type of fire coating system. An EFIS system, this is an exterior insulation and finish system. This didn't used to be special inspected. It came up a few years ago just because we had so many failures with it. And again, I know some architects who'd like to go out there and do it, but unless you have the training, you really need to divert that to someone who's got that background. And then, of course, all fire-resistant penetrations. We don't need fire getting through a hole in the wall that it wasn't intended to. Smoke control systems, again, required to keep people out. And then any special case as the building official would deem necessary. And that's the kind of blanket statement of 1705 1.1. So special inspectors still have reporting requirements, and 1704.2.4 out of the IBC places down what those requirements are. The required report elements are found in 3.1, of course, of that same section. So special inspectors, it's not just a matter of getting out there and looking at it, they have to be able to memorialize it appropriately. Fabricators shall keep all those records themselves according to 1704.2.5. Fabricators shall perform and retain records on inspections of all fabricated elements as if the work was performed on site. That means, you know, if you're inside a shop, you don't get that get out jail free card. You still have to do those special inspections. This tends to be what I see a gap in the industry as a whole. A lot of that is because the jurisdictions do tend to take lead on enforcing special inspections, and this is an area that you just don't either by for whatever reason they don't really prosecute as vigilantly. Special inspections are not required when the fabrication is approved by when the fabrication is performed by an approved fabricator. That is the exception. That's why it's important to have those approved fabricators being on those lists if you're in there. However, if you're not an approved fabricator, you fall back to 2.5.1, which says, oh yes, you still have to have those in special inspection shop or not. Special inspection report is to include several things, and we'll look at them. There's 5 things. So number 1, they need to have a list of materials, systems, components, work required to have special inspection or tested by a building official or registrant. The second element, and this is all out of 1704.3.1, the type and extent of each special inspection, type and extent of each test. Now that doesn't mean they have to do all these together. It's possible some stuff isn't tested. Going on to continue, number 4, additional requirements are found in sections 1705, 10, 11, and 12. And then, of course, special inspection to identify whether it will be continuous or periodic. You have to report which of the 2 processes it was. So what is the definition of a proof fabricator? First of all, we've got to look at the definition of what a fabricated item is. As you can see here, this starts to mention, and it goes over a couple slides here, structural load-bearing or lateral load-resisting members or assemblies consisting of materials assembled prior to installation in a building or structure. Go on to the second part of this. It provides requirements for quality control done under supervision of a third-party quality control agency are not fabricated items. And you can see this very clearly. Examples are metal buildings, precast. These are not fabricated items because they're actually assembled in the field. A proof fabricator is established in a qualified person or firm or corporation approved by the building official pursuant to Chapter 17 of this code. So this gives the building official the ability to name what an approved fabricator is. Now here's the key. An approved fabricator has to be capable of doing a certificate of compliance. In other words, they don't just produce this stuff and walk away. They're required to put a certificate of compliance, a COC, and we'll talk about that momentarily, what those requirements are. These are actions required by approved fabricators. In 1704.2.5, the fabrication of the unit, wherever it is, shall be done on the premises of the fabricator's shop. Special inspection shall be performed during fabrication. Okay, even if you're an approved fabricator, you still have internal quality control inspections you're supposed to do. A report must be complete on each one of these elements and inspections, as we can see here in 1704.3.1. Moving on, 1704.2.5.1 says special inspections during fabrication are not required where the work is done on the premise of a fabricator registered and approved to perform the work. The approval shall be based on review of the fabricator's written procedures and quality control manuals, and this is where, that's why this is highlighted. This is where a lot of jurisdictions fail, because they tend not to have that record. They don't look at that. And I've requested it on a couple projects from one jurisdiction here, and they didn't keep those records the way the code said that they should. Again, more information here. The materials workmanship, they have to have periodic auditing of the fabrication quality control practices by an approved agency. In other words, just because you're an approved fabricator doesn't mean you're not held accountable. And most of these industries have their own quality standards. They even have people go out there and audit it. That's what this is saying about it. and then they shall submit a certificate of compliance after they fabricate everything to the owner, who will then give it to the owner's agent, that then has to, as we see here, submit it to the building official. The interesting thing is I don't recall ever in recent, if ever in my career, being asked to submit any of these on any of my projects, whether it was a approved fabricator or not. And again, that's where the jurisdictions are failing, because this is their responsibility. They should be asking for that before they grant the certificate of occupancy. So approved fabricator, they have to be approved through 1704.2.5.1, and it's based on a review of the fabricator's written procedural and quality control manuals, periodic auditing of the fabrication practices by an approved third-party review or the building official, and typically provide QC personnel qualifications. Going on, other requirements for this review is on national accreditations. You see some of the potential associations that would grant such types of approvals. This is all cited directly out of the building code as well. Now we get to the certificate of compliance. This is specifically out of the IBC 1704.2.5.1. It has to be provided at the completion of fabrication. It must be provided to the building official. Like I said, I've never had a building official ask for it, whether it's an approved fabricator or not. If it's not an approved fabricator, by the way, it requires same special inspection submittals that any other field erected or constructed component would have. It must state that the work was performed in accordance with the approved construction documents. The COC, if it doesn't say that, it's not going to be compliant with the code. And it's similar to a final inspection report that the jurisdiction would do to show, hey, you're done, you're completed, you can move on. So now let's get into a summary of what we've been through. There's been a lot in this video already. Inspections required by Section 110 of the IBC. They have preliminary, they have required inspections, footings, concrete slab and underfloor, lowest floor elevation, framing, lath and plaster, weather exposed balconies, fire and smoke penetrations, energy efficiency, so anything special which is out of Chapter 17, and of course the final. And of course the final gives us what we want, what we're working for with the owner, for the owner, and that is a certificate of occupancy. There are two types of special inspections. There's the continuous, the one where the special inspector's there the entire time the work's being done. There is the periodic one where it's only during certain phases, or they come out, especially if it's on a large construction site. Special inspectors have to meet certain criteria and qualifications. Can't just be anyone. The agency performing it has to be independent. They have to have the equipment. They have to have the personnel. It's not just some guy in the back of a truck saying, hey, I can do it. You have to be qualified. The agency has to be capable of funding and supporting that type of work of staff. And of course now, materials. We have the structural steel. We have concrete. We have masonry, high load wood diaphragms, soils, deep foundations. We have wind resistant systems, seismic resistant systems, spray fire, the fire EFIS being another big one, fire resistant penetrations, smoke control systems, anything that the building official might say, you know what, we want to also make that as a special inspection as well. And then shop fabricated systems inspected by the fabricator or a third party, or depends on if they're approved fabricator as well. Specific information to be reported in these special inspections are found in IBC 1704.2.4. Fabricators shall keep records of all special inspections, and approved fabricators are not required to perform special inspections, but they do have their quality control checks that should be recorded, and again, they must put that COC together. Special inspection reports include the material, the systems, the components, testing that is required, the type and extent of each special inspection, the type and extent of each test, are the additional requirements from seismic or wind, 1705, 10, 11, or 12 needs to be noted. Special inspections also should have the type of inspection identified, whether it was continuous or periodic. And of course, for approved fabricators, they must meet the specific approval process. They're not required special inspections, but they still have to provide that COC for each project. As we can see, the required inspections, special inspections, shop fabrication requirements, and approved fabricators are all very complex issues at times. And once you use this as a launching platform, whether you're a designer, specification writer, or a code official, so you can get these items correct. There are a lot of times that the jurisdictions who have the final authority on this, they don't follow through with it. We as designers tend not to know it or require it ourselves. We don't put it in our specs, and that leaves a gap in the system that could potentially raise the risk to our clients, to the project, and long-term to society. If you find this video helpful, please be sure to like it, subscribe to our channel, click that little bell so that you'll get notifications every time we upload. I like to try to do it about once a week. Again, remember to design well, build safe, and maintain our buildings for their maximum life expectancy. Again, until the next time you're with the professor out.